Right, well, I don't know about you guys, but I never noticed that there was a pyramid in The End of the World. I'll have to give it a rewatch sometime. I honestly never saw that in the episode. Oh well, never mind. That's the little opening joke out of the way. Yeah, down to business. The pyramid at the end of the world. Well, it was much better than I expected. I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I don't go into Doctor episodes with a pessimistic approach. You'll know that by now. And I definitely didn't think it was going to be an awful episode from the promotional material we'd had. Although having said that, the promotional image that's probably on screen right now to accompany this audio is absolutely terrible. It's the worst we've had in ages. With a Series 9 image of Capaldi. I mean, what were they thinking? But anyway, yeah. Apart from that, the trailers were okay, I suppose. It looked good. The reviews were fairly positive. I think the real reason, though, that I wasn't quite so hyped as usual was because, as you might know already, if you follow me on Twitter, on the Saturday just gone, the same day that this episode was broadcast, I had an important school function for the end of the half term, and it kind of felt like the whole week was building towards that, you know, just naturally, because, and then Doctor Who was just there as a little add-on at the end, you know, oh, it's this massive event on Saturday, and then, oh, yeah, there's Doctor in the evening. I mean, I think half the time I kind of forgot it was on, because I was so preoccupied with other things. I kind of thought, you know, oh yeah, we're in the middle of a series, Series 10. Oh, I'd forgotten that. So what did I actually think about this episode? Well, I know that a lot of people have been saying that perhaps excusing the quick, kind of flashy, previously trail, which I actually must say I thought was done brilliantly, it was very unique and very different. But the pyramid at the end of the world was a much easier story to follow than last week's offering, that's what people have been saying. And of course, that's true. Whilst I was a pretty big fan of Extremis, I can't argue with this point, you know. And the episode probably works a lot better for having a less complex central premise. In the context of Doctor Who, it's fairly old school, fairly traditional. A massive alien artifact falls from the sky, as it were, so the military minds start shooting at it. Except this time it's slightly different because the Doctor is blind. He's more in the dark than usual, both literally and figuratively. So he's not quite as assertive, and yeah, it's interesting to note actually that the Doctor is the one that tells the armies, commands them to start attacking the pyramid. And I suppose that's because he doesn't have clear vision himself, as usual. So he's more open to suggestion, but also actually, fundamentally, he relies on others to test his theories and plans of attack, because without his eyesight, he can't kind of determine a lot of things, and that's how it's kind of played out. And I sort of like how that's made the Doctor weaker, how it's played out, and how it's influenced the stories we've had over the last few weeks. The more I think about it, the more I think it's quite strange that we've never really had an alien invasion like this before. And by that, what I mean is that it's a scenario where accepting the help of the invaders, the aliens, is the preferable option, the lesser of two evils, if you will. It's a really unique way to do it, and yeah, it's quite surprising that we've never really had this before. I mean, I suppose we've had ultimatums and negotiations like this before in Children of Earth for Torchwood, but in Doctor Who, I can't think of any examples from the episodes that I've seen, which is the whole of New Who and about half of Classic Who. So yeah, it's quite a weird one. I mean, I suppose as well we've had things like the Ghosts in Army of Ghosts, where it looks like it's going to be something nice and pleasant and good, and it turns out that they're actually Cybermen, a force for evil. But yeah, this is still quite a unique concept, and it's great that it's being explored and used to its full potential across this Monk 3-parter. One thing I did love about this episode in particular is how, after all the political stuff with the armies and the GM crops, all that kind of stuff, the actual climax itself is much more personal, and it ends on a much more personal, intimate note. There's quite a parallel in that kind of penultimate scene, I suppose, with Erica and the Doctor. It's a lot like Wilf and the 10th Doctor in The End of Time, as some people have already pointed out. The thing where they're on either side of the door, and one of them's about to die. And I'm sure a lot of viewers, like myself, got some regeneration vibes from that. You know, is the 12th Doctor about to regenerate early? Oh dear, because the 10th Doctor went pretty much the same way. But there was a twist, a very personal twist. It was gobsmacking that Bill was the one, the Doctor's companion, that gives the monk consent. As I've already said, we're clearly meant to think that it'll be the three armies that do it, or the UN guy, or the deadly bacteria, but no, it's actually something much more simple, much more relevant to the characters, well, the recurring characters, I suppose, to the Doctor and his companion. And that is great, because it puts the Doctor and Bill's relationship in a very interesting position. It's in a place that we've not really seen a Doctor-companion relationship in before, because she made that decision to give in to the monk for two reasons, the way I see it. Firstly, out of love, but secondly also because she felt cheated by him lying to her. And I think genuinely, I mean, she kind of felt scared, because you have to feel love to give consent and all that kind of malarkey. But at the same time, I think there was an element of kind of like her being his guardian in a way, like he's a naughty school child or something, and she's going, "You've kept this secret from me, now I'm going to have to act and do something about it." So she's not exactly fallen out with the Doctor. There's still that relationship there, but I suppose she's doing what she thinks is right to save the Doctor from himself, if that makes sense. So will the pair be able to reconcile next week? Well, it seems not, at least to start with. Obviously in Empress of Mars and the Eaters of Light and the finale, then, you know, things will go back to normal. We know that, like, we knew that the Doctor would get his eyesight back eventually before Christmas, before his regeneration. We knew it wasn't going to quite go that far. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it pans out, definitely. Those menacing, meddling monks were particularly intimidating this week, I thought. I'd say more so than they were in Extremis, actually. I think their desire to be loved, to be accepted by the human race, was quite disturbing. And furthermore, of course, there's the ginormous pyramid, which is clearly a symbol of their power, a physical representation of, you know, this is what we can do, which makes them appear quite powerful, I suppose, as well. And if you add to that their control of security cameras in top secret organisations and labs and stuff like that, and their huge, vast knowledge of human history, unmatched by any other alien invader we've ever seen on Doctor Who, then yeah, I think they appear quite intimidating, quite freaky. And there's also the revelation in this episode that their appearance, that the whole monk thing, well, maybe not the robes, but definitely the face, the prosthetics, the in-show explanation for that is that appearance is seemingly based on that of a human corpse. Well, that's the implication, because they say that humans look like corpses to them. So the way I see it, I suppose, is, well, let's get another analogy going. It's like if you saw your mum, except she was a zombie from the future or something, and she said, "This happens to me, this happens to your mum, at some point in the future, you know, zombies take over and I'm affected. But oh look, I've got the strands of time, I can create an alternative future for you if you just consent to my help and advice." That's basically my interpretation of it, that they are decayed humans, well, they look like them at least, and they've come back to warn us, you know, very directly, this is what you'll look like if you don't accept our help. So yeah, that was pretty yucky, pretty freaky, and definitely next week as well, the monks look like a hugely intimidating force, and I'm quite anxious for Bill, to be honest, and the human race, and about what will happen to them, because the monks are now in control of the Earth. Oh dear. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes in The Lie of the Land. Now, as you'll probably know, I love it when Doctor Who gets political, and this week's episode was no exception. In fact, it was a pretty good example as they go. We had direct representatives from 3 of the Earth's biggest armies, references to all sorts of presidents, including Donald Trump, oh what a joke, and a mass of UN soldiers thrown in for good measure. As I mentioned earlier, I was definitely getting Children of Earth vibes from the whole episode. The constant confrontations and lengthy negotiations, and as well it was also quite reminiscent, I suppose, of the Zygon two-parter, Peter Harness's previous episodes, not least because they do actually share the setting of Temesi-Stan. Of course, the whole Earth invasion theme and style also harks back to similar RTD-era stories, and fundamentally, it all goes back to the Pertwee era, really, doesn't it? I mean, what doesn't? But yeah, it's very like one of those stories, very political, very gritty, very military, and got lots of army characters in there, and aliens, and yeah. But the most notable thing that the Pyramid at the End of the World reflects is our own current modern world, of course it is, and the political issues that are faced by humans, you know, in 2017. I've seen some reviewers make a pretty big thing about political and scientific inaccuracies, just little things about procedures, for example with GM crops, about them having the right ventilation and all sorts of stuff like that. And then with the negotiations, that it's unlikely that they'd be over so quickly, that one person could represent the whole human race, and a deal with a foreign country or alien force would be able to be made just like that in the real world. Well, it is Doctor Who. I mean, it's not a massive problem, in my opinion, if things aren't entirely scientifically accurate or politically. You know, why should they be? If it's plausible enough, like with the whole Kill the Moon thing, Peter Harness's first script, I thought that episode, it pushes it a little bit, but it takes itself seriously. It's very kind of philosophical, and, you know, it gets you thinking. I think that kind of distracts you from the possible unlikeliness of the moon actually being an egg in the real world. So it's the same sort of thing here, but I think it's just about plausible and convincing, and while I was watching it, you know, I definitely wasn't thinking, oh god, this is so inaccurate, guys. Yeah, it just kind of brushes over your head, I think, and for many viewers, for casual viewers, it'll be the same, so I don't think it's a massive issue. So I've ended up talking a little bit about next week's episode, just, you know, naturally throughout this review, but let's have a proper section devoted to it. The Lie of the Land. Well, wow, that's all I can say. That there's a promise of more monks, a rogue doctor, fake news, and Missy's long overdue proper return to the world of Doctor Who. The vault will open and she's going to come out. I'm seriously hyped for this one, and on the subject of Missy, just again, it's really interesting to see her making another appearance so soon. It wasn't announced at the start of the series, you know, previously. The news of her appearance in this episode kind of did leak in when the synopsis for The Lie of the Land was released a few weeks ago, and obviously the trailer confirms this, but it's still quite a nice little surprise because we didn't know beforehand, like I say. And I think, in particular, it's becoming more and more obvious what the whole Vault story arc is actually about, because it's not about who's in the Vault. It's not just like Bad Wolf, where throughout 13 episodes, you get little mentions of a little phrase, and then your understanding of that phrase is kind of completely turned on its head in the finale. Same sort of thing, I suppose, with, well, let's think of a good example. But with Clara in Series 7, where it's constantly about who is she. This is developing a lot more, and there seems to be more to it. Because as I said last week, I think definitely the focus has now shifted fully from it actually being Missy, from us learning the occupants of the vault and who's actually inside, to the consequences of it being Missy, the consequences of that and what it means for the Doctor and for the Doctor Who universe. I think really it kind of combines that element of things like the Bad Wolf story arc, or Torchwood, or The Impossible Girl, where it keeps you guessing throughout the series, but also elements like The Hybrid last year, which are a little bit more thematic, a little bit more kind of philosophical in a way, I suppose, a bit harder to grasp, because now that we know it's Missy, like I say, it's about what that means for the characters, and for her development as a character, for her relationship with the Doctor. So I think really with Series 10, we've kind of got the best of both worlds when it comes to the story arc, which is great. I imagine next week things will be very dangerous indeed. With the Doctor not around, Missy seems to be the only person that Bill and Nardole can turn to for advice. But will she actually help them? What are her motives going to be? What is she going to be driven by as a character? That is what is interesting about the whole Vault thing. You know, about what her time in the Vault and her experience of being near to death, being close to death, about to be executed, what that has done to her character, if anything, and to her mind, and how that will influence how she reacts to various situations as we kind of progress towards the climax of the series and the 12th Doctor's era and his regeneration at Christmas. So overall, The Pyramid at the End of the World was gripping from start to end. It was really interesting to see a weakened Doctor attempt to tackle such major political issues, and such issues that will have a big influence on Earth and the human race. However, now his blindness has been cured, and it will be interesting to see how that influences him in the weeks to come, and what happens next, with him seemingly going rogue next week and teaming up with the monks. But we will have to see. The monks were terrifying as ever. There were some fairly hypothetical, but still relevant political ideas explored, and one hell of a cliffhanger. The musical score was also awesome. I love that little recurring 4-note motif, you know, da 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 da, that one. I thought that might just be exclusive to Extremis last week, but no, it's been brought back for this episode, and it kind of seems to be a little theme for the monks for the Monk trilogy, and yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's a very memorable theme. So yeah, the score was great, the plot was great, the Doctor was great, Bill was great, the monks were great, everything was great. A fantastic episode this week, continuing the high standard of stories that we've had in Series 10 so far, and I cannot wait to see what happens next. So, thank you very much for watching this review. Please do comment your thoughts on the pyramid at the end of the world in the comments section below. And, well, now I'm on half term, so you might see some more videos this week, perhaps, maybe. But otherwise, I'll see you next week, as always, for my review of The Lie of the Land.